Many consider the Disney parks to be sacred soil, but if you do some digging, you might be surprised at what you might find underneath the most magical place on Earth. From how often people actually spread ashes on Disney property, to real ghosts haunting the rides, and everything, trust me, everything in between. This is the dark history of Disney's myths and urban legends. On December 15th of 1966, arguably one of the greatest creative minds of the 20th century, a pioneer of film and television, the man behind Disneyland and later on Disney World, Walt Disney, passed away. It wasn't until years later that rumors started circulating of the company preserving Walt for future reanimation. I know, insane, right? The idea of freezing the recently deceased first came into pop culture through sci-fi films of the 70s and 80s. A futuristic idea that was actually already happening by the late 60s. In a scientific practice called cryonics or cryopreservation, once a patient is clinically deceased, within minutes their remains are frozen to -320 degrees Fahrenheit in hopes that resurrection may be possible in the future when medical advances and technology might allow it. Now, this is a real thing. As of 2014, the remains of about 250 bodies have been cryopreserved in the United States alone. Could Walt Disney have been one of the first patients to go through cryonics? This rumor only grew when the internet came around. A simple Google search will reveal a plethora of articles, videos, and message boards speculating on this topic. Some even say this was a possible reason that a particular Disney movie from 2013 was called Frozen, so that when searching Walt Disney Frozen, you'd be inundated with sing-along videos of Let It Go rather than poorly photoshopped photos of their Frozen company founder. The first documented recipient of cryopreservation was in 1967, a psychology professor at the University of California by the name of James Bedford. The company that carried out the procedure, Life Extension Society, or LES, had begun developing their cryogenic suspension process by the early 60s in Southern California. Is it within reason that Walt could have been aware of the new way to, quote, save himself, considering this was around the same time that his health began to deteriorate? Oh, and there's one part I left out. The urban legend is not a frozen Walt Disney. It's only his head. The reason this tall tale shifted from his body to just his head might have been due to Walt's health and where it was at the time. Although never officially confirmed by the Walt Disney Company, the reason for his passing was pretty obvious. Like a majority of middle-aged men in the 1950s and 60s, Walt was a real puff master, nicotine ninja, a Marlboro maverick. You'd rarely find Walt without a cigarette in his hand, including when he visited his theme park. But since his death, the Disney Company has gone to impressive lengths to try to hide it. In fact, for the last 30 seconds, I had to re-edit all of these cigarettes back in between Walt's fingertips. And this is the case for any photograph of Walt Disney that you might find around the parks or published online. Even here at Disney's Hollywood Studios, there's an entire exhibit dedicated to Walt Disney, yet it's impossible to find a photo of him smoking. It is kind of crazy that you could see clearly where he had a cigarette in his hand before they photoshopped it out in almost every, let me show you. See? Look. Right there. Right here. This one has to be the most obvious. Look at how ridiculous. Who holds a sheet of paper like this? The supposed preservation of Walt Disney's head would, in theory, preserve his mind and not his lungs that by that point would likely have looked like Tobey Maguire from that one scene in Spider-Man 3. The theory of Walt's frozen head made it into pop culture vernacular in the 2000s. In a cartoon sketch on Saturday Night Live, Futurama, with a frozen head of Walt's personal friend Richard Nixon, and parodied in of all places, in an episode of Nickelodeon sitcom iCarly. In this episode, the gang takes on Dingo Studios, a parody of Walt Disney Studios. Freddie and Spencer discover a cryogenically frozen head of Charles Dingo, the company's founder. The head of Dingo was a facial mold of now disgraced Nickelodeon executive producer Dan Schneider, but that's beside the point. The hype of Walt Disney's Frozen head seemed to cool down, pun intended, post-Disney's Frozen movie release in 2013. That was until 2018 when an indie film by the name of The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head was released. This guerrilla-style sci-fi comedy was nearly fully shot incognito around Disney World's Magic Kingdom and follows the tale that Walt's head was actually stored in the tunnels beneath the parks.
Surreal.
Take your finger off my nose.
Do I believe that Walt Disney's severed head was frozen to later be reattached to a willing donor's body? Sadly, no. The closest thing we'll ever get is a Walt Disney animatronic. Whether or not it accurately resembles Walt, I'll leave for interpretation. For those die-hard Disney adults looking to pay respects to the man who started it all, you could visit Walt's burial site at the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California, where his cremated remains are buried alongside his wife, Lillian Disney. While Walt Disney passed away under the medical care of health professionals at St. Joseph's Hospital, this is not always the case for everyone. As they say, the Reaper does not discriminate on where or when he decides it's your time to go. Not if the Disney company has anything to say about it. At least that's according to this long-standing Disney legend, and that is that no one dies at Disney World. For years, there has been rampant speculation and stories about an internal policy that if someone happens to die at Disney World, they must do everything in their power to not let that happen on property. Meaning, paramedics will attempt to resuscitate long after the individual has departed, or in some cases, not declaring anyone dead until they are off Disney property. Is there any validity to this bizarre practice, or could this magical corporate verbiage be just that? I turned to one of my favorite Disney historians to find out more.
People often say that nobody dies on Disney property. What I think that is like a magic coping mechanism that we use to maintain the illusion that this place is magical and like separated from reality. I think that it's obvious that people die everywhere. Death is something we're so afraid of, and so specifically to keep such a safe place like Disney parks, and kind of keep that theater alive.
Disney World in Florida hires out off-duty officers from the Orange County Sheriff's Department and employ their very own emergency response teams, both of which fall under the government jurisdiction of Disney's Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, formerly known as the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Part of the perk that comes with you being the ones to pay the EMTs, fire department, and police is that they will have a much quicker response time, and the rules or training they are subject to are partially decided by the Disney company. This is likely also why you'll find a lot more police body cam videos of people getting arrested at Universal and not at Disney World. So much to say, it's not out of the question that EMTs could be urged to slightly adjust their trained medical response while on Disney property. What brings even more debate to the no one dies at Disney conversation is that in many areas of the United States, EMTs cannot legally pronounce someone dead, meaning that the person could not, quote, die at Disney anyway. They'd have to make it to a hospital and have a doctor officially make the call. The truth of this urban legend likely lies somewhere in the middle.
You know, we as people, we be dying. It happens a lot, and it's part of life. The idea that nobody dies here, it sort of like keeps it innocent. You know, the parks are so deeply tied to our childhood. Innocence is important, you know, in a big way.
A huge part of the Disney appeal is this escape from reality. And regardless of if death occurs at the most magical place on Earth, there will always be a link between the two. And that's because many of the most die-hard Disney fans take it upon themselves to make arrangements to return to the parks once they've passed on. In dusty-ass form, that is. Which perfectly leads us into our next Disney urban legend that is unequivocally true. People really do spread their ashes at Disney World. I should not have to say this, but do not do this. There are very strict rules against it. You will be trespassed from Disney property, and it's just unsanitary. But that doesn't stop some brave souls from bragging about how they got away with it. Like Dave Ensign, who poured his friend's ashes inside of a Disney-branded cup, walked in, and even took a PhotoPass photo for proof before dumping them out in a garden bed. Many deceased Disney adults wish to be dumped in the waters of It's a Small World or the rivers of America. but by far the most popular seems to be the Haunted Mansion. Who wouldn't want to be the 1000th happy haunt? I mean, by this point, there's likely been hundreds of ashes dumped on that ride, meaning you would probably end up being the 1284th happy haunt. When this does happen, Disney's custodial staff even has a special name for it. Code Grandma is called when a pile of ashes is discovered around the parks. Then they're promptly swept up and sent off to the dump. There are plenty of other special custodial codes as well, and unfortunately, a lot of these they probably have to deal with on a daily basis. So next time you see a custodian cast member, please thank them for all that they do. I guess I just don't understand the desire to have your ashes briefly at a theme park before they're cleaned up and then thrown away. Disney even power washes all of their walkways overnight. Carpets vacuumed, the whole park gets cleaned out. Is it really worth the risk of having your family or friends getting banned over? Ashes are not the only human remnants you could find around the Disney parks, or at least that's according to one popular Disney legend. The Pirates of the Caribbean was one of the first major ride additions to Disneyland. It took 3 years from development to construction and opening to get guests sailing through the waters of the Caribbean. At some point during those 3 years, it was decided that rather than using fabricated skeletons for the cave portion, that they would use real ones. Allegedly. We don't know exactly if this would have been a cost-cutting measure or to add a moment of realism to this audio-animatronic heavy ride. Regardless, this is another one of those bits of Disney trivia that is just accepted as fact. It's said that during the designing stage of the ride, multiple different mock-ups of skeletons were fabricated, none of which looked accurate enough for the Disney standard. So Imagineers took a trip to UCLA's Medical Center Cadaver Lab to pick up a few props for the new ride. And when Pirates opened at Disneyland in 1967, all of the skeletons seen on the ride were real human bones. Obviously, this is a story that Disney would never confirm themselves. But just imagine if this was really the case. First, you check off organ donor on your driver's license registration, and next thing you know, your skull is bolted to the ceiling, yelling, "Dead man tell no tale," at theme park guests for the rest of eternity. By this point, there is no way that these skeletons could still be real. The ride is almost 60 years old. Every 15 years or so, Disney rides go under extensive refurbishment, replacing tracks, ride vehicles, reskinning animatronics, prop replacements, the whole 9 yards. Even if this was the case in 1967, it would have been removed and replaced with a fabricated skeleton decades prior to today. So next time you ride Pirates of the Caribbean with that one annoying friend and they lean over to tell you this skeleton is real, please just tell them that Ryan said they're wrong. With all of this talk of Disney's flirtation with necromancy, it's no surprise to find that there are more than enough legends of hauntings around the Disney parks. While I'm sure there are hundreds of tales like these, there are 2 in particular that stuck out to me. The first takes us to Sunset Boulevard at Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Hello, my name is Christian Martin. I used to be a former Disney cast member. I worked for Disney from 2014 to the end of 2022. Is that good? Or you need something else? A lot of my time at my Disney career was at the Hollywood Tower Hotel. So a typical morning over at Tower of Terror usually consists of, you usually would have 2 cast members that be working tower control, and then you would have a few cast members going through the checklist, and you're basically pressing buttons to make sure that buttons are working and they are connecting. So there's some superstitious stuff that you have to do at Tower of Terror. One of the biggest things is you gotta say hi to Caesar in the morning when you're at unload. If you do not say hi to Caesar at unload, bad things can happen. So Caesar was a ventriloquist doll in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Basically, he had a whole episode dedicated to him where he was a ventriloquist. And usually with ventriloquists, you're controlling it and stuff like that. But actually, Caesar had life to him and he could talk back.
Maybe Mr. Miller had a fight with his wife at breakfast.
Maybe it's more like he heard your bad jokes.
You will actually see him on the unload floor. Right when the drop is done, you gotta see him to the left or to the right, depending on which side you were on.
Is it insane to think that a ventriloquist doll could be controlling the fate of a multi-million-dollar theme park attraction? After all, the Twilight Zone episode it originates from sees Caesar manipulating and controlling the mind of his owner. Maybe his new home in the tower could be his new target. Surprisingly enough, this wasn't the first time I had heard of unusual superstitious practices for cast members working on rides at Disney. A similar opening shift tradition was present on the former Splash Mountain at Magic Kingdom, this time with a backstory of darker origins.
I worked on Splash Mountain from 2019 until about 2022. Frontierland Attractions was a fun but sometimes stressful job, especially Big Thunder and Splash Mountain. If either of those rides go down, you'll get an earful from some angry parents that their vacation is ruined. Towards the end of its run, the original Splash Mountain went down a lot. But there was one thing that was always talked about, to at least help prevent that from happening. So each morning when doing our rounds before the park opens, one thing that was not an official part of our training, but every cast member knew about, was to high-five Brer Rabbit as you passed him when walking the ride path. This Brer Rabbit, to be exact.
Wait, so you would high-five the animatronic?
Well, not really a high-five, more like an air-five. At first it seemed kind of strange, like, was this a sign of good luck for the day? Till one morning I forgot the high-five, and the ride went down 4 times that day. When Splash Mountain would break down, it would typically always happen in one spot. Right before the drop that would send you into the laughing place, I think it's drop 3, is usually where the ride would break down. I don't want to say this, and I guess that's the reason I wanted to keep this interview anonymous, but it's because of Billy.
Billy is the name that cast members working on Splash Mountain had given to the supposed ghost of Splash Mountain. In a tragic incident in November of 2000, a 37-year-old man was riding Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom when the ride broke down just before the 3rd drop. This drop is the one that's indoors, in near pitch-black darkness. After waiting an extended period of time, the man got up from his seat, which at the time did not have a lap bar or seatbelt. He stepped out of the ride vehicle and onto the walkway adjacent to the ride path. Moments later, the ride began moving again. As he attempted to hop back into the boat, he slipped and fell into the water. He was stopped cold in the chilling waters of Splash Mountain. As he stood up, the boat behind him kept moving. He later passed away at a nearby hospital. Following the fatal accident, Disney installed motion sensors along the length of the walkway and areas surrounding the ride path, so that if anyone were to hop out of the ride, an automatic stop would be triggered.
Nearly every time without fail, if the ride were to break down, it would be from a sensor trigger at drop 3. We'd then be forced to walk the ride path, confirm that nothing is wrong before resetting the system.
So you're implying that the ghost of Billy is haunting the ride?
This isn't speculation or superstition, it's just always where we would get false triggers. I'm not going to say it was his ghost, but when it happens enough times, you start to think.
I myself am not the biggest believer in ghosts. I would need some fairly substantial evidence in order to even consider them existing here at Disney. Luckily for me, the internet has no shortage of video evidence of ghosts roaming the Disney parks. Like this handycam footage of the Disneyland fireworks that at first glance is totally normal. But after a closer look, you catch a glimpse of a transparent human-looking figure standing on top of Sleeping Beauty's castle. Many online believe that this could be the ghost of Walt Disney himself, as the figure looks to be standing in a similar 2-finger point pose that Walt is often seen doing in photos. Now, there's a chance this very well may be a new Halloween effect that Disney was trying out, since the original video was uploaded in September of 2009. Or could this be some found footage, Cloverfield-style special effects that was added in later? Over in New Orleans Square, there have been similar sightings of this supposed Walt ghost. In the security camera footage, you could clearly see a ghost-type man walking briskly towards the front of the Haunted Mansion, towards the queue entrance and into New Orleans Square. While I want to believe this security video is 100% legit, there is one explanation that likely is the reason this footage appears this way.
Ghost stories at Disney are so fascinating to me because, by the by, they're usually like backed up with like security cam footage that's like old VCR tapes that have been taped over 1 billion times and have like triple and quadruple sort of like recordings like dubbed over and over and over.
Since the angle of these security cameras had not changed in years, if a tape from months prior was being written over, a person walking through the queue during the same moment on this re-recording could appear, at least in a faint way, on this recording. There's a high chance that this ghost was likely just a custodial cast member that was leaving the mansion late one night months before this recording. In this footage from a fixed security camera on the Tower of Terror, you'll find a maintenance cast member going through a ride effects checklist on a morning test ride, when all of a sudden, right beside him was a ghostly figure. Could this be just another aberration in a security camera VCR tape? Honestly, this one kind of looks the most believable. Or how about this one from Space Mountain at Disneyland? It's a little harder to make out, but we see what many believe to be a mysterious single rider entering the ride vehicle from the exit platform. It does seem odd that each of these instances took place in the pre-digital security footage era. Maybe Disney has more of a lock on these things getting out to the public since the mid-2000s, or maybe in the modern age, it's harder to fake these supposed ghost sightings. Although, as an experienced video editor myself, I will say that is definitely not the case. With some simple overlays of clips and some grainy effects, these types of ghost sightings are far too easy to fake with modern video editing software. Do you believe in Disney ghosts? Are there any Disney urban myths or legends that I missed out on? Please let me know in the comments down below. Who knows? You might end up in a part 2 down the line. I want to give a huge thank you to 3 of my favorite theme park nerds for helping out on this one. Disney Dan, Christian Martin from The Wildest Ride, and that shadowy figure who talked about Splash Mountain. Definitely go give those first 2 a follow for more deep dives into the parks we all know and love. Shout out to Roosevelt's for these sick threads I'm wearing in this video. I am absolutely loving their spooky season drops this year, and for 15% off your first order, you could follow the link in the description of this video. For behind the scenes content and exclusive vlogs, you could join the Pity Crew over on Patreon. Even a 1-month subscription will help support this channel nearly 100 times more than watching an ad on a YouTube video. To learn this strange history of Disney's abandoned speedway, you can check out that video right here, or one of my all-time favorite videos on the other side. As always, I am Ryan, this has been For the Love of Theme Parks, and I will see you all real soon. Bye.